Hello and welcome to the Beniverse Halloween edition. We decided the powers here at the Beniverse, which is me and consulting from Branson, we decided let's take a break from the usual week-by-week discussions on movies, and let's just focus on Halloween. We did something similar last year, but this year we decided to solely focus on the Halloween films revolving around Michael Myers, though in the case of the 13 ones does not actually revolve around Myers. So we decided let's talk about the Halloween series from Halloween 1978 to Halloween Ends, which will be coming out in 2022 in October. I decided Branson is not the biggest fan of horror films, plus due to time availability, we just weren't going to be able to record all 13 episodes together. He may jump on from time to time to give his opinions, but I decided I wanted to talk to somebody who I knew was the biggest fan of not only Halloween, but horror films, a guy that I've known for, oh my gosh, I met him in 2016, so that's, I guess we've known each other now for 6 years, literally exactly, because we met right in college. He is my freshman roommate. This person is a really good friend of mine, someone who has actually been on this show before, and I am honored to have him back. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the show my roommate, Tris. Former roommate, I should say. Former roommate. I guess we're not roommates. Though, can your nickname be Roommate Tris?
Yeah.
Just whenever I bring you on, we'll just refer to you as Roommate Tris.
Works for me.
Sounds great. Tris, I am delighted to have you on to this series. I'm delighted that you agreed to film 13 episodes basically in a month. That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So I should just state right now, we're recording some of these episodes out of order just due to time constraints, due to things falling through, us trying to arrange guests. It doesn't always work. So the first episode that we are recording is today. It won't actually be the first episode you guys are hearing, so maybe my introduction seems a little repetitive at this point. But we're recording today Halloween 2. Not Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, not Halloween Kills, not Halloween Resurrections, and not Halloween H2O 20 years later. We're starting with 1980. Why didn't I look up the year? 81?
Yeah.
81's Halloween 2, which is the sequel to the smash hit 1978's Halloween. Tris, are you ready to just kind of dive into the world of Michael Myers? Or I guess technically we've already gone into the world of Michael Myers for the audience.
I mean, like the movie, we kind of just dive into it, so let's do it.
Let's just do this.
It was the boogeyman.
Can I just say before we jump in, again, thank you for joining me, Tris. Our Fantastic Beast episode, which is well rated, actually. It's a weird one that I didn't think was going to get some positive response.
Really?
There is 12 of us who just love Fantastic Beasts, The Secrets of Dumbledore. Is that what the movie's called? That's what the movie's called, right?
Yeah, The Secrets of Dumbledore. And all 12 of us went to see that movie in theaters.
All 12 of us saw it. We might have been in the same movie theater.
Might as well.
And that was it. It was just us 12, and then maybe some other grandmas who got lost thinking it was the Lost City and walked into the wrong movie theater.
And we made up that box office.
We made up that box office, which is why we're not positive there's going to be a sequel.
I hope there is.
We'll have to continue that talk, because that's another talk. Remember when that was right when that talk happened? We were discussing some of the actors in that movie, and we were at that point, we're like, this Ezra Miller guy, he sounds a little unstable.
Little did we know.
Yeah. We did not quite know what was going to happen the next few months, because I remember we just mentioned, we're like, some of these stories don't sound very good. And boy, did they get worse. It was
Batgirl was still one of my most anticipated movies.
Yeah, let's see what happens before we record. Uh, let's see. We don't have the MCU in the state it's currently in, where we're finding out special effects artists are basically disowning the property left and right. So that's been one thing that's changed. I'm trying to think. That was like one of the big summer stories. Top Gun Maverick was still a movie like no one was actually like that excited for, except a handful of people.
I still haven't seen it.
$1.6 billion, Tris. $1.6 billion.
You know what? I just don't have any interest.
It's fair. It's totally fair because I didn't have any interest. I will say it's a really damn good movie. Oh, Kenobi wasn't a reality.
Oh yeah.
We hadn't seen Kenobi, and now 4 months after Kenobi has aired, it doesn't feel like anyone's talking about Kenobi. It kind of just like it's been 4 months. It came out. I think the last episode was like beginning of June. That show's been out for 4 months, and it doesn't feel like it's really stayed in the cultural zeitgeist. It's kind of the crazy thing with streaming right now, where everything's kind of exists and then is forgotten, and then if you don't like something, you just move on to the next thing. Andor will be coming out next week from when we're recording.
What does?
Andor.
Oh, I'm not excited for that, but I'll still watch it.
That's how I kind of feel as well. But like I said, we're in like a very different state of, maybe not like a hugely different state, but I mean, when we recorded The Secrets of Dumbledore, there was questions whether movies really could exist in a movie theater again. There had been a bunch of films that had bombed recently. There was kind of this worry, like, is summer going to actually make any form of an impact box office wise? And this summer does end up playing it out. And the reason I'm bringing this all up, because I know it, how does this relate to Halloween's? We're going to have a Halloween Kills movie. Sorry, not Halloween Kills. This is Halloween Ends. And Halloween Kills, did you see it in theaters last year?
I watched it on Peacock.
Yeah, I saw the movie in theaters, I think like week before Halloween. Had a rowdy audience. There was a fight that ended up breaking out. There was prank wars going on. It was a miserable experience seeing this film in theaters. But it has obviously a huge drop off box office wise because of the pandemic. People aren't going out to see movies at high numbers. And a film like Halloween Kills, I think it did successful enough. Maybe not the success that they were really hoping for. Hi, Kitty. What I'm bringing up, Tris, is that in about a month, we're going to see Halloween Ends. Are you planning on seeing this one in theaters?
Probably.
I think I'm going to. I feel comfortable going back to the movie theaters a lot more. I'm going at my natural average, if not even up this year. But it is going to be like kind of the first test that the Halloween series has had since the 2018 one, where it's like, okay, how popular are these films, and how popular was Kills? How many people actually watch Kills? Because I feel like I'm one of the few who watched it. Do you get that sense? Like, do you hear people really talking about Kills?
I know it's real popular in the actual horror community.
Yeah, it feels like it's popular within Halloween fans and horror fans. But that first one, that 2018 one, right? That hits the cultural zeitgeist. It kind of brings back Michael Myers to a relevancy that we hadn't quite seen. And this is all a parable for what we are going to be talking about today, when Michael Myers is the biggest thing post that first Halloween movie from 1978. And then a really interesting thing happens in between 1978 and 1981. And in 1980, we get a little movie called Friday the 13th. This is a movie I have no love for. I'm sure. Are you a fan? Are you a fan of? Have you seen any of the Friday the 13th films? I'm sure you have. I'm sure you own all of them.
I own all of them.
I thought you owned all of them. I kind of remember them laying around in our college dorm, untouched, dusty.
I have a love-hate relationship with Friday the 13th, but You know, and we'll get into it. I enjoy some of those Friday the 13th movies more than I enjoy Halloween 2.
Yeah, and I
And
think
we'll get into it, but
I think it's a good time actually to get into it because I think you're hinting at something that is really important. And what I'm hinting at is that between Halloween 1s and Halloween 2 is this new start of a franchise called Friday the 13th. It is essentially a ripoff of the first Halloween film. Now, it's not exactly the same story, but a lot of the same aspects, a lot of the same storytelling, a lot of the same visual cues. The way Jason stalks in the film is very reflective of how Michael Myers does it, except for two things. I see you're raising your hand, which is going to be really confusing.
It's not Jason.
Oh, it's Jason's mom.
You would not survive Scream.
When is it the second one where we find out that it's Jason's? God, that's so weird because then we find out the twist in Halloween 2, right?
No, we find out in the first one that it's Jason's mom.
No, but I'm saying it's not until Friday the 13th Part 2, right, where we actually get Jason as we know him, right?
I mean, without the hockey mask, but yeah Jason's the killer.
Which is interesting because, of course, then like Halloween 2 has this very notorious twist that really shapes and defines the franchise going forward. Very much same with Friday the 13th Part 2, with the fact that Jason now really does become the definitive figure of the of the Friday the 13th series. So much so that I forget that he's not actually the killer in the first movie. The reason we bring up Friday the 13th, and I'm sure it's something you're alluding to, it's basically very much a carbon copy of Halloween, except there's way more blood, way more gore, and a lot more sex. And how does Halloween 2 respond, Tris?
With more blood, more gore, and more sex.
Exactly. That's exactly what this film is. It's the exact same film as the first one, slightly different setting, with everything just kind of escalated to 100. And it's a very typical trend you see in sequel films in general. Sequels always kind of are like, let's take the basic premise of the first film, but then just raise the stakes 100. Let's have it, we have a budget now. Let's do some more crazy stuff with it. And then see what happens. Now, this film, and I don't know how much you know about the background of the pre-production / production of Halloween 2.
A lot.
Okay, good. So we're going to get into the Carpenter stuff because, of course, Carpenter directs the first Halloween movie. And then the second one, he steps out. He still writes the film, but instead the director is...
Rick Rosenthal.
Thank you, Rick Rosenthal, who ends up directing the two most famous films on his resume. Can you name... One of them's obviously Halloween 2. Can you name the other most famous film on his resume?
I mean, I know he directed Halloween Resurrection.
That's the second most famous film he's had. He's directed like 5 or 6 films. He directs Halloween 2. He directs like this 1984 comedy that's not a big hit. I think he has like an 87, like One Piece in the 90s, and then he has Halloween Resurrections. So this guy is pretty much like most famously, without a doubt, known for the Halloween series. It's a pretty weird thing that they bring him back 30 years later, essentially. Oh, no, not 30 years, 20 years later to direct what is probably, when we actually get into it, the worst Halloween movie, probably pound for pound.
Yeah, I have a different least favorite one, but
it's bad.
It's bad.
It's a really bad film where Busta Rhymes stars in it. But regardless, Rick Rosenthal directs the film. And to say he's not as competent as a director as John Carpenter would kind of be an understatement.
Which I don't think is largely fair.
I don't think it's necessarily fair either, but I think there is a talent-wise that one has. There's a reason one of them's John Carpenter and the other one's the guy who directed Halloween 2 and Resurrection.
Yeah.
I think that is fair to say.
It is fair, but I wouldn't completely blame, at least the misgivings I have with Halloween 2, on him.
Mm-hmm.
I would blame it more on John Carpenter.
Yeah, so let's go into this.
I don't think he wanted to make this movie.
he clearly does not have any interest in making this film. He openly admits that the plot twist of Laurie and Michael being brothers and sister comes from an idea when he's drunk, when he has no clue how to write this film. You
Right.
know, the guy, Tommy Lee Wallace, who is the editor of the first Halloween film and then ends up directing Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, he has a statement where he says, no one was all that excited about the prospect of returning for a Halloween 2. Carpenter just doesn't think there's enough for a story, so that's kind of why he does this plot twist where it's just like, okay, well, now at least we have a little bit more of a fleshed out story, but it's not like it's particularly well thought out. It doesn't explain anything meaningfully. And Tris, you said a point that I'll just let you take it right now. John Carpenter's not particularly excited to make this film. We have the quotes from it. What's the evidence, though, when you're actually watching the film?
We just go on like really weird tangents that don't go anywhere. Like apart from the brother and sister thing, but like we have the reveal about Sam Hain, which
Which
comes out of nowhere and doesn't really go anywhere.
I'm going to need you to refresh me and the audience on the Sam Hain twist. So we're kind of, because sometimes some of the characters just kind of fold together.
So Sam Hain in the movie is they find that Michael has broken into an random elementary school.
Oh, the Sam Hain's not a person. He's actually, this is like a Irish, like,
yeah, it's a pagan. It's a pagan festival.
Oh God, I forgot. I knew about this part, and I saw it again today. But yeah, explain the pagan rituals, my friend.
Well, in the movie, I don't know if the movie is accurately describing the rituals of Sam Hain, but we are told in the movie that Sam Hain means Lord of the Dead. Mm-hmm. And Michael, we are led to believe that Michael is the Lord of the Dead. Why Michael is writing Sam Hain with blood on a random elementary school chalkboard? I mean, I guess we'll get into it in Curse of Michael Myers, but
there's a lot of stuff that never makes sense in this movies, and I think the sequels have the unfortunate task of trying to explain certain elements that are within this film. But you're right, the reason this film never fully works is because Carpenter clearly has no interest, and he's not filling plot points with stuff that he actually thinks it's good ideas. He just needs kind of something to explain it. How does Michael Myers survive 6 shots? Well, he's a satanic, like, basically beast that can't be killed. Why is he so after Laurie? Well, because they're brother and sister. And can we get into that right now? What is your... Because this is maybe, of all the things within the Halloween franchise, this movie has the most divisive scene or moment, whatever you want to call it, with the Laurie Strode, Michael Myers relationship. And I mean this quite literally. People disagree on it. Some people really love this idea. Some people just were really upset when Halloween 2018 reboots it and doesn't have that plot point in it, because of course the Rob Zombie ones do. Some people are very glad it's not. John Carpenter himself has very much stated that this was a mistake and that he's glad that the reboot sequels got rid of it. What is your overall thoughts on probably the most divisive scene in, not just, like I said, Halloween, but just in horror in general?
I don't think this movie does it well. Like, even by the end of the movie, when Michael has supposedly died, Laurie doesn't even know. So that plot point isn't even really taken to the end. Our protagonist doesn't know the twist. It'd be like if we were told Luke Skywalker is Vader's son, but Luke doesn't know. Like, what's she supposed to take from that?
Are you right? She never
I am right.
Out? Oh my god. Oh my god. You're totally right. They don't actually reveal that to Laurie.
That being said, I do think that other movies in this franchise do the relationship thing better, and we'll get to them.
I think so too. I think Halloween 20 years later still uses that plot point. And God, I can't wait for this episode. I really can't wait to this episode. The Rob Zombie ones, there's a lot of things. Family is forever, and I like a lot of the ideas that that movie uses. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I do. We'll get
I'm not.
into the good and the bad on that movie, which there's a lot of both. But
Yeah,
there is a family element to this movie that works. I mean, one, it's great because family, that means you can bring the kids. It's a good brother sister story. I mean, one of the best brother sister stories of all time, right, Tris? Are we disagreeing on that point?
on Halloween,
Oh yeah, man. Like this is a movie you bring the kids to.
the oldest of two sisters, also.
You don't bring the kids to Halloween.
Actually, I showed my 10-year-old sister, 11-year-old sister, the first Halloween, and she said it was boring.
It reminds me of a joke Steve Martin told years ago, where he's like, "I brought a 6-year-old to Gladiator, and they cried the whole time. Now, it wasn't my kid." Yeah, dude. Halloween 2, like I said, it has the most divisive thing, focusing it back up a little bit. It has the most divisive scene, and it's honestly a scene. You're right, it's not particularly well handled in this movie. I never had thought about the fact that they don't actually know that to be true about. Laurie Strode does not know that to be true, that they are brother and sister, though she does have that vision. Not vision, she does have that dream.
You're right, she does have a vision.
She does have a dream that really doesn't actually make any coherent sense within the movie.
Where her adoptive mom says, "How many times do I have to tell you I'm not your mom?" and then
Yeah.
walks away. I,
No, don't forget. Then she goes and visits a child, Michael. That I guess that's like an idea she suppressed. But like, why? And like, why is there connection at all? Like, why would the family let them visit? You're right. It's a complete mess. I think that's the scene where they try defending it. Like, oh yeah, we actually did see Michael and Laurie together, but it doesn't work in any coherent way. I don't mind like I said, I don't mind the big plot reveal of this movie, but there's a lot of other things I do mind about this movie. I think I sent you this article. About a year ago, I wrote a review for Halloween 2 on my blog, beniverse.com, and I just wanted to just focus on a few things about this movie real quick. And one thing that I wrote that I like, so I'm just going to rerun it back. It's kind of my concluding paragraph. The biggest sin of Halloween 2 is how prolonged and boring much of the runtime is. Despite being an hour and a half, much of the film is unnecessary. In the first 40 minutes of the film, nothing of significance happened. The runtime feels tedious. Is it clear that the creators did not have a clear idea for a sequel? God, I used clear twice in a sentence. Dear Lord. In particular, the script is non-existent. Nothing of importance happens until the final 15 minutes of the film. God, I'm so repetitive back here when I'm not being edited. This is when I'm just doing my blog stuff. Until then, the film focuses on subplots, such as the doctor and a nurse's sexual tension that ultimately leads to their demise. While the atmosphere of the hospital is eerily creepy, it ultimately hampers the storytelling. The storytelling never explains why Laurie is never heavily guarded when sedated within the hospital. Had just a few simple security measures been enforced, Laurie would have been safe. It is these ridiculous moments that suspend all disbelief and terror within the movie. Halloween 2 is an abysmal in its execution. It is not ridiculous enough to be a fun watch, yet too ill conceived to serve as a proper follow-up to the original. Instead, it exists in this weird middle ground within the franchise. It is one of the few films within the franchise that feels ultimately forgettable. Now, let's just excuse my horrible writing. There's a reason I have an editor, and there's a reason I don't do a ton of blog posts, because that requires a lot of editing on my part that I just don't want to put in all the time. But the main idea of this movie is it's directionless, I feel like, for a good chunk of the movie. There are a lot of scenes that happen, as we've already described, that have no particular purpose. Kind of like this podcast in many ways, to be honest. But let's just focus on one point specifically. I think what this movie does so wrong, and it's also, interestingly enough, a trap that some of the later Halloween films fall into again. It's not particularly interesting to see Laurie Strode in a hospital for what, 60 to 70 minutes of this film's runtime. It's just not a good idea to start with. Like, the
No.
whole point of why you like the first Halloween movie is because it's Laurie Strode kind of battling the shape, this unkillable force, and it's this person's basically will and determination to survive. In this, it's just like she's kind of being stalked, and it doesn't make for anything interesting. It's like she is literally just a sitting duck that will be killed by Michael Myers until she has to move because the plot needs her to move.
I I just really hate Michael. Like, he's a bad stalker in this movie. I don't understand why he kills all of the nurses and doctors. It's not like he sets them up like how he set up her friends in the first one to scare her. Like, if we are supposed to go along with this twist that they're brother and sister, why is he wasting time going after these doctors and nurses that we don't care about because they all suck?
Well, it's that issue that we're just going to hit multiple times on this thing. The one thing Carpenter does really try to expand on is by the end of the first movie, you're kind of left like, what is the shape? Is he human? Is he something more? Is he kind of this creature from hell that just can't be killed? I mean, that's kind of the implication by the end of the film that, like, Loomis can shoot him 6 times and he'll still survive and walk out. So now there's this idea, and it's the one idea that I think Carpenter is actually genuinely interested in developing in Michael. Who is this guy without actually telling us what this guy's story is? And the idea that he creates in this movie is, let's basically make him not necessarily a demon, but an unkillable force from hell. And
Without saying it.
without saying it, but the idea is now like in the first film where everything feels so clever and it feels like he's stalking people and everything's kind of related to, honestly, just quite frankly sexual violence in many ways. Not sexual violence in the fact of like rape or assault or anything. I mean more sexual violence in that he is perceiving the act of sex to be something worth killing somebody over, essentially, is his idea. If you notice, like, most of the people who die in the first Halloween movie are horny teenagers because he deems them kind of lesser, because he has this weird sexual frustration from his sister, which maybe again you don't get that subtext in the Carpenter movie. Rob Zombie makes it quite clear that's the subtext of the story, but I actually think that's a pretty fair reading of it. And I think that interpretation does have some validity. And then in this movie, he's kind of just killing mercilessly. And there's the argument that, well, that's a good thing. You kind of want Michael Myers to be killing because he's such a sadistic, villain. But now you also just have the issue of, like, there seems to be no rhyme or reason to anything Michael does. And the thing that the first film does so well is, yes, Michael is a killer. He is a psychopath. He is a sociopath in every way. He's not basically human. But there still seems to be some careful deliverance to every action that he takes. And in this film, it's just like, I'm going to kill because I can kill. And it takes a little bit of the mystique away from him because you just know nothing's particularly safe. So everyone who's on screen who is not named Laurie Strode or Dr. Loomis, ultimately has to serve the point of dying at some point at the hands of Michael Myers. So would you say that's a correct assessment?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Tris, just a question for you. What is the scene for you when you're watching this film where you notice the Friday the 13th effect on this movie?
The entire hot tub.
That's the scene.
Yeah, the entire hot tub sequence.
Yeah, so
How he kills her.
yes, if you could do me a favor as I'm drinking water, can you remind the audience what the hot tub scene is for those who are not 15-year-old boys anymore and maybe haven't seen that scene in a while?
So, basically you have the romantic duo, nurse and doctor,
which serve, sorry, before you go on, serve no actual narrative purpose in the movie.
Oh yeah, they're not even in Laurie's way. If anything, they should be the safest people in
Yeah.
this hospital. They are out of the way. But they sneak off to have sex in a hot tub in a hospital. I don't know anything about
Okay,
boiler rooms.
I was going to ask you the same question.
I don't know
What's going
anything
on?
about boiler rooms. I don't know why there's a hot tub in a hospital.
It's such a weird place. I always wondered that. I'm like, what is that supposed to, like, that's a hot tub, clearly. But why is it there in a hospital in a boiler room? But continue. Please continue.
They get separated because the water's too hot or too cold or whatever. It doesn't matter. And the dude gets choked in the background. He dies. And then you have the woman who is what's the word? Who is all sultry and like doing her hair. And Michael comes up and puts his hand on her shoulder and starts massaging her. Going
Really?
into that sexual frustration bit.
Yeah.
And
And
then
actually, like, a good use of humor in the film. It's one of the few instances where I actually think the film understands humor, and it's like a kind of twisted humor. But the joke of her like stroking Michael Myers' hand as he's just kind of standing behind her with the mask on, it's actually not a bad like visual gag. It's just a funny situation for Michael Myers to be in.
I've just never found it funny. I just never really enjoyed this kill. If
Okay.
anything, the kill makes me the most uncomfortable.
Uh,
Not because it's gory, but it just feels like it doesn't feel like Michael Myers. It feels like Jason.
yeah, it's so overly complicated of a kill. It feels like not even like complicated. Like it's a pretty simple kill when you break it down. It's she scalded and drowned, but like there's something so like maybe like not clean about the kill from Michael.
Yeah, he doesn't. If he wanted to drown her, he wouldn't have brought her up every time.
Mm.
That is making her suffer.
It's a torturous thing for him, which it never feels like Michael Myers killing is torturous. It feels like he does
Yeah.
the quick kill, and then he kind of plays with the food once it's dead. But to
Where
like play with the food is a different assumption.
it felt a little gratuitously violent.
Mhm.
And I love horror movies. Slashers are my favorite.
Mhm.
Like I love Scream, but when the violence gets more gratuitous than like realistic, it starts to just take me out of it.
Yeah, and I mean, you're most famously known as a prude. I mean, that's your whole. I mean, you're always about the G-rated stuff.
Right.
College. Let's just. I think there's a clear point right now where I've already given my review of the movie. You've probably already hinted at your this. I think you're probably being based on how we're talking about the film. You probably sound a little bit more negative on this film than I actually think you probably are. When you're reviewing this film, what are your general thoughts about the movie? I know you've hit on a few of them already, but I also know there's aspects of this movie that you have fun with, I would say.
After this last rewatch, no.
Okay.
I was mainly bored. Like
Yeah.
like I watched this movie right after watching the first Halloween, and to go from the climax of that movie to going slow and meandering and just looking at a boring hospital.
No, it's very true because here's what I'll say. We talked about this movie a year ago because I had maybe not rewatched all the films, but I had at least rewatched half of them in preparation of Chris Duran being on my show to talk Halloween H2O. So I was rewatching a handful of them to really just understand how different actors had played Michael Myers. And I remember texting you. I had this thought where I'm just like, the reason I don't like this movie at all is one, that it doesn't seem to understand what made the first film so special, and two, it seems to be a great point in Hollywood where if you wanted to say Halloween established the modern horror film, then I think it would also be a fair statement to say Halloween 2 established the modern horror film sequel, which is excess but without attention, I think is the way to describe it. Where it's just like, not to say that there aren't great horror sequels, it's just that what happens usually is there's one great horror story, and then they're like, how do we make like 5 more of these movies and keep pumping these out every other Halloween to make $20 million on a $2 million budget, which is what this film is. It's a $2 million makes $25 million.
Right.
And I think it's such an interesting point to talk about Halloween as a context of like horror films, and this is what every horror film becomes, because horror films do often become a case of diminishing returns. What I did find, though, upon rewatch today was there's an interesting part of this movie where the film peaks too early. That's my biggest issue when watching this film. I was reading some reviews on this movie online, and somebody was talking about the scene where Michael Myers is on fire at the end of the movie. And they're like, this is such, like, Halloween 2, obviously not as good as the first film, but what's so good about it is you can watch them back to back, and it's a great companion piece where it's just like feels like one long movie together. And I disagree with that statement. And I think the reason I disagree with that statement is because you're right. It builds up. The first one builds up so well. And then the second one actually keeps that momentum. And then it all just kind of falls off. And that's the weirdest thing with this movie. By choosing to continue it, you get the excitement of the first movie right back, because we get to see the final 5 minutes of the movie again. We're in Loomis's headspace. We're with Laurie. And then, of course, like, the film just can't sustain that, and it has to put Laurie in the hospital bed. And it's another just thing when Carpenter's talking about the original idea for this movie is that Laurie Strode, it's been a few years since the incident happened, and she's now like living in I think like an apartment in like, I think it was like New York or someplace like that, and Michael now comes back. That's arguably more interesting because there's now more of this character, there's more development and time that has gone by, and it just doesn't work in an satisfying way when you just have it continue right away, because again, you have this quick bang of momentum and then it all just comes crashing down. What's the scene for you when you're watching this film? One, if you want to respond to anything I said there, please feel free to. But when you're watching this scene, what's the scene for you that's the best?
I start enjoying this movie the moment the kill happens, where the nurse gets lifted and her shoe, and the chase starts. Once the chase starts, this is my favorite chase in the franchise. This is the only one, even though I have seen this chase many, 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 many times, I still get nervous. I still am like, oh, is she gonna make it? Oh, is she gonna make it? Oh god, she's not gonna make it. Okay, she made it. Like, that is my favorite part of the movie. And then it culminates into the climax with Loomis and Laurie and Michael finally together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is this. I think what works so well about the finale of this film, which I think is probably undeniably one of the better scenes in this movie, and it's just the talent of, again, if you wanted to call Rick Rosenthal's direction maybe excessive at times, maybe too in your face, I think the cinematographer in Dean Cundy is able to kind of tone down some of those uglier tendencies and really get back to what Carpenter is trying to install within the first Halloween film. I mean, this is a guy as a cinematographer who I just like. He's one of those cinematographers that's one of the best in the world, and yet most people probably can't name him like they would be able to name a Deakins. This guy has done films from Escape from New York, The Thing, Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which he's nominated for an Academy Award for, Jurassic Park, Apollo 13, Garfield, and was an assistant director on Garfield, Tale of Two Cities, True Story, R.I.P. the Queen, I have a conspiracy that Garfield killed her. He is now
Of all the things I thought I was going to hear on this podcast,
Garfield.
Garfield and the Queen.
Did we? Was that a famous midnight watch for us in the dorms freshman year?
No,
Garfield, the Tale of Two Kitties.
no.
Are you sure?
You
We
tried.
didn't rent it?
You tried to rent Pink Panther 2.
Oh yeah, classic. I never tried renting Garfield 2. That was not a movie we turned on.
No,
It just sounds like a movie we should have turned on. We'll have to redo.
watched it
freshman
by
year.
yourself, but I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I think the cinematography, like I said, it works so well that it actually captures some legit fear and stakes within this whole movie. I mean, the iconic scene from this movie, right, is where Michael Myers comes out on fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's the scene. That's the money shot of this movie in every way possible. That's the most iconic scene. It's maybe one of the most famous moments of Michael Myers' lexicon. It's well directed. It's well acted. It's well just a great stunt scene. It's a pretty shocking visual scene. These scenes are far and few between. But like I said, there are moments where, again, you're able to strike lightning twice, but you can't sustain the lightning. The first film does it so well where it sustains it. The second film falls off. When you're watching this film, actually, I kind of just want to hear your thoughts about the pacing of this film. I know you've hit on it a few times, but like when you're talking about this chase scene, what is it about the pacing that actually like buys you into the story? If that makes sense.
Well, for most of the movie, it's been like really slow, and then a kill happens. A boring kill happens, I should say. Or not a meaningful kill happens, but it's slow. And then all of a sudden, Laurie has been found by the shape, and it's fast-paced again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm able to care about what's happening because finally Laurie has some agency. Because before, she's just been comatose.
Mm-hmm. Would you call this an example of just addition from, not even necessarily subtraction, but just like everything around you is, let's just say you have ice cream.
Uh-huh.
You have like just a plain strawberry ice cream. And then the exact second you put rainbow sprinkles in that strawberry ice cream, it's like, oh yeah, now this is delicious. So it's like, really the only change is you just added like a little bit of sugar that has a little bit more of a texture. So it's just like, for you, is this the case of just like, just by adding something, it makes the film feel a little bit more tense? Or is it actually something that you feel like is well directed?
Well, when you put it like that...
I know, I put it in a framing device that really makes it sound crappy. I think it probably is a case of more well-directed scenes.
I think it's pretty well directed.
I think...
I just think Rick Rosenthal probably does better with fast-paced action than, like, looming dread. Like, John Carpenter, his looming dread in the first movie is so good and can sustain me.
Mm-hmm. That's the whole selling point of kind of that first movie. You're watching and you're able to, like, be sold on this pace that the movie has. And it is, like, this guy's just not as dynamic of a filmmaker, I would say, as Carpenter. Not against criticizing him, but when you watch Rosenthal's direction, I think the word you use, dynamic, is a really good one. I would just say he's an energetic director. And I think that comes with the idea of excess that this guy has for this story. He likes capturing a lot on screen and doing a lot. It's the reason why Michael Myers has to throw the woman in the hot tub like 10 times, because that's more cinematic technically. That's more visuals being captured. That's Michael being more active in that scene. Where Carpenter, it's a very static direction, I think you could call it. Static being probably the wrong word, but just, it's so much more, less is more in movement. I mean, there's so many scenes where Michael Myers will kind of just raise his knife and kind of slash and then bring it right back down. That's not really Michael Myers' vibe in this movie, because that's not Rosenthal's interest as a director of action.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair that I have some notes on the show that I want to touch on real quick, and I want to make sure we get to a handful of them. The MVP performer for this movie, I think there is actually only one performer who would be deserving of an MVP award for this. Like, if you were to call him, he's the most valuable person in this movie. They're doing the most heavyweight in this movie. I accidentally probably spoiled who I'm choosing right here.
Well, it's Jamie Lee, based on what you're saying.
Yeah, it's Charles Cyphers as Sheriff Brackett, of course. No, for me, my answer.
I thought you were serious.
No. The answer for this is like most valuable performer, the one who's doing the most, the guy who's given the most to do with it. In the first film, I think it's a pretty fair battle between Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance. In the sequel, it's Pleasance movie. It almost shifts the focus away from Jamie Lee Curtis to Pleasance in this movie, and I think he captures the spirit and energy that this film needs. And if there's any redeeming parts of this film, it's that we get to spend more time with Dr. Loomis as he's searching for a creation that he basically feels guilty that he didn't just kill.
It's kind of like Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster, in a way.
Mm-hmm. It's a good comparison. It's just the idea of creator and monster. And he hits most of the beats in this movie, I think, pretty proficiently. Again, it's kind of the situation of he just has to deliver ridiculous dialogue in this movie. He has to explain the satanicism of this ritual going on.
May I just quote, "I shot him 6 times!"
Yeah, he has to yell stuff a lot of the movie. He's kind of going through a breakdown in this movie. But I will say Pleasance holds his own very well in this movie for basically becoming the lead of this series, and obviously that's a trend that continues on past Halloween 2. Pleasance returns to carry on the franchise for at least one full installment. I don't remember, is he in 5?
He's in 4, 5, and 6.
He's in 4, 5, 6 as major roles? Really? Okay, so yeah, he's really like, to some degree, this is equally as much Jamie Lee Curtis's franchise as it is Pleasance until they reboot it.
Have you never seen 4, 5, and 6?
I've seen 4. Is 5 the one with Paul Rudd?
No, that's 6.
I've seen 4 for sure. Okay, I've seen the first one. I've seen the second one. I think I've seen most Season of the Witch. I've seen 4. I don't think I've seen 5. I've definitely seen some of the Paul Rudd moments in 6. I've seen H2O. I haven't seen Resurrection fully. And then I've seen the zombie ones and the new ones. So I'm probably like 2 or 3 not into it.
We're up for a ride.
I know the general stories of these movies, but yeah, I didn't realize he's in 5 and 6. Jesus.
Yeah, he's kind of the lead in those 3 movies, apart from Danielle Harris and Paul Rudd's character.
Mm-hmm. Would you agree with my take, though, that he's probably MVP performer in this film?
I don't want to completely discount Laurie or Jamie Lee.
I don't want to either. It's kind of the situation I had with Kills, where it's like, it's kind of Judy Greer's movie because Laurie Strode's ultimately in bed. Please continue, though, because there are actually some actual moments of genuinely good acting Jamie Lee Curtis gives in this movie.
I think with what she is given, she does pretty well. But, yeah, this is Donald Pleasance's movie. Mm-hmm. We kind of have to believe through him that Michael is a threat. Sorry, my cat's being a demon. We have to believe through Pleasance that Michael is a threat because Michael himself isn't as scary as he is in the first one, personally. Mm-hmm. In my humble opinion. So the fact that he can make Michael seem at all threatening just shows what good of an actor he is.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that take. I think it's Pleasant's movie. I Here's also the interesting thing with Dick. What's his name?
Dick Warlock.
Dick Warlock. He. I think they say it's a reuse of the first mask from the first movie.
It
There's
is.
something. It looks off. Maybe it just doesn't fit him quite like it fits the other actor.
Yeah, it doesn't fit him. He has a wider face.
It just looks weird on him.
He's actually one of the. He's in Season of the Witch also as one of the robot guys.
Yes, I knew that. I did know that.
And when you see his face, you can kind of see why the mask doesn't fit him, right? Because he just has kind of a wider face than um, Nick
It's
Castle.
it's so interesting, the mask of these movies, because they're so unique in each one. Like I can notice the difference between when I'm watching Halloween 1, 2, and 4. They're three, maybe again, not necessarily the different mask, but they just fit the actors different. There's just something weird about the looks. And then, I love Chris Durant's a guy I've had on the show. I've known him for years. I really do think he gives a great performance as Michael Myers.
His mask sucks, though.
His mask is horrible. It's
His
just like
mask is
it's
so
too there's too much eyes in that, and we'll get into that when we talk H2O. But it is just kind of an absolute just disaster. And then the zombie ones, it's just it's zombie style. You like it or you don't. And then I think the recent reboots done by Danny McBride and I'm blanking on the director of those news.
David Gordon Green.
David Gordon Green, thank you. I think those are probably the closest to replicating the first movie.
Yeah,
It's also probably because they're adjusting the mask to make sure it fits the actor properly each time. Where it is the case in this movie, he's kind of wearing his dad's suit. It almost feels like, where it's just the suit doesn't fit properly,
uh-huh.
and it's an issue with this movie, for sure. God, we're kind of just ragging on the movie, and I don't mean to do that.
I mean,
Issue is I don't have a lot positive to say about this movie because I just don't think it's really noteworthy besides the twist.
if we look at the critics,
They agree with us. Its average
it's
rating is
objectively
4.8.
it's objectively bad.
4.8 out of 10 is the average. It gets a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes, where the first one I'm pretty sure is certified fresh.
Yeah, it's in the 90s.
Let's try to make this a little bit more positive as we start to wrap up. I said we're going to do our 3 favorite kills from each movie, because what is Halloween? What is Michael Myers without the kills? This one, I think there's a total of 6 kills that we actually see, and I would say 2 of them aren't pretty memorable. But
Yeah.
I'll let you start. So you start with your number 3, and I'll tell you if I have it on my list.
For me, my number 3, I think is I don't think she has a character name. But it's the first kill we see.
Yes, that's my number 3 too. Actually, the character's name is Alice Martin. She's the neighbor to Laurie Strode, that is killed by the butcher knife.
Yeah.
Good kill.
Just because out of all of the kills, that one feels like it came from Halloween 1, almost. Apart from the cougar pounce. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly the scene.
But the shot of him looking at the knife going into her, all in all, I thought that was a well-directed, scene.
I agree. It's my number 3 too. What's your number 2? I'm curious if we have the same 2. You might have this one at 1, actually.
My number 2 is the blonde nurse who gets lifted up with the scalpel.
I did not have this one. Which one's the kill that has the eyeball shot? Kind of the infamous eyeball shot?
That's the syringe.
Yeah, which one is that? Is that not the one you're talking about? Okay,
No.
so break down your kill again.
It's the one where Laurie is, on drugs and walking down the hallway, and the blonde nurse, I don't know her character name because...
Yeah, okay, keep going, but I know who you're talking about.
She turns around and then she sees Michael, shove a scalpel up this nurse's spine and raise her up. And then as she dies, her clogs fall off.
Yeah, this is the one. Yeah, this is a really gnarly kill. This is like it's like to me this is the only one that blends Rosenthal's style well with kind of the intensity of a Michael Myers from the first film. This is
Yeah.
the one that feels like elevated, but in a way that still felt true to the character. My number two, I don't know if you had this one. I'm curious if it's your number one. I had I can't pronounce his last name, Ben Tramer kill.
I hate that scene.
Do you really?
I hate that scene.
So let me break down the scene since it was my pick. This is the one where it's the friend of Laurie's who's also possibly like a romantic love interest.
Her crush first movie.
Yeah, her crush from the first movie. Loomis sees him walking. This guy's wearing a very similar mask to Michael Myers. Loomis goes out to basically kill this guy. Realizes it's not actually Michael, and then he gets hit by a police car and burns to death.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably explained it bad. You're do it justice.
He gets hit by this road police officer that's coming from nowhere, that's going like 80 miles per hour on a Halloween night where there are kids on the street, hits a news van, and then it explodes. What?
But that happens all the time.
No! I'm gonna say no! That does not happen all the time.
Is it a bad scene because the premise doesn't make sense, or is it a bad scene because you don't like the violence of the scene? Which one is it? Is it just a dumb scene, or do you just not like the kill?
I don't like the kill and I don't like the logic. The violence is fine.
Okay, I think this is a pretty gnarly kill, especially when you see his body all burned alive. It's a pretty it's an actually disturbing one, and I just like that it just says it's one of the few deaths in the Halloween series that has no relationship to Michael.
Yeah,
Michael did nothing. Michael's gonna be walking around the hospital, see the body, and be like, "That wasn't me." I like the kill. It's a really ridiculous. It's an over the top kill. It almost feels like comedy, not comedy. It almost feels like a parody of a slasher film, where it's how can we kill this person in the most gratuitous way? But I don't think it's meant to be a comedic scene in any regards. But it just so happens when you watch it, you're like, oh, if you watch this as kind of a parody of this type of movie, it's pretty genius. Until you realize that there's probably no self awareness from anybody directing or writing that scene.
Yeah, I love it, or I love it because I laugh at it.
Yeah,
I think it's silly.
It's so absurd. Then I know you don't have my number one. What's your number one?
My number one is Michael when he burns to death.
Oh, I didn't count that one. I didn't think about that one.
I think it's a pretty solid ending. Are you rethinking your top three now?
So here's why I didn't think about that one. One, because it's the weird thing of context for the movie, right? When you see the movie the first time, that's his death. And then, but me, being in 2022, I know definitively not only is that not his death, that's not his death for that series and the series going forward, because Halloween 2 also is still not a prequel, but it's still the predecessor to H2O, correct? It's Halloween 1,
yeah.
Halloween 2, and then H2O. So I guess it's just in two timelines, I know this isn't the end, so it's hard for me to, when I'm thinking about the scenes, my best kills, I just don't think of the Michael Myers one as an actual death, even though you're right, because Carpenter does clearly state it, that Loomis and the Shape are dead by the end of this movie.
Yes.
You might be right. It's the most iconic scene in the movie, Michael burning alive. It's a really gnarly stunt. And I know for a fact you don't have my number one, because we already talked about kind of our disagreement with this scene. I actually think the nurse Karen Bailey kill, which is the hot tub one, I actually like this kill.
I'll give you that it's iconic. Mm-hmm. But I'll just disagree.
Yeah, You're right when you say it is not maybe in the tone of Michael Myers, though I guess the question is what is actually the tone of Michael Myers? I think we're putting the tone of Michael Myers as what is set up in the first film. If you're going by some of the Predator or the sequels, you would maybe argue that this kill feels a little bit more in line with like 4, 5, and 6 than
Yeah,
it does the first film.
but I have my own issues with 4, 5, and 6 that we'll get into.
Yeah, like I said, this scene works for me. It's a really brutal death. I think it's a really just it's kind of the scene where you realize Michael is a monster as they're portraying him in this film, and the idea of him just being a sadistic, basically reincarnation of evil on like walking on Earth. It makes sense that this death is so violent, and I think it fits the tone of this movie that it's trying to do. Is it necessarily the best kill that I think Michael does in the whole series? No way in hell. Do I think it actually lines up pretty well with what this film is trying to achieve? I would actually give it yes, and in what this movie and what Rosenthal's direction is trying to be, and whether you like it or not, whether that's successful or a failure for you, I think it's most tonally in line with Rosenthal's vision for the movie.
I will agree with that point,
Yes,
but this is a sequel,
it
so
is.
it can't exist by itself.
Yeah. Do you want to get into our Last Jedi debate now? Because that sounds like a point that some other people might be making about the Last Jedi. It can't just exist by itself.
I will even say that Last Jedi as a sequel is still a good Star Wars movie, and y'all can fight me.
I listen. I 100% agree. I'm just saying, if we're gonna start falling down a slippery slope,
I just said, I didn't, I'm not backpedaling.
I know. I'm just saying we start getting a little close. We're eventually gonna have to do the Last Jedi. Though actually, I guess you and I can't do it.
I think it would be more fun for you to have to disagree with somebody.
Yeah, I'm like I already did that with Branson, and the point would just be us two just celebrating a movie that we both think is miraculous in many ways.
And I'm saying I like it as a sequel.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on from that topic and let's start getting to maybe the finales of this. The legacy discussion of this portion, which I know I didn't give you a lot of notes for. In terms of Halloween, where does this kind of where does this rack up? No, where does this stand up for you? Is this one of the best ones? Is this a middle? Is this really bad for you? Like out of the 13, is it like give it like A, B, C, D, or F if you kind of categorize them that way? Where's this fallen for you?
I would give it a C. Like it's in the middle.
Mm.
And I think what saves this movie for me is that even though the director is different, it's mostly the same cast, apart from the new characters. It's the same town. It feels more in line with the first one than some of the sequels do.
Mm.
Are. So I'm going to put it in the middle.
I probably put it closer to the D category. This is really a movie I don't like, and I'm citing back to my old review of this movie, which again is horribly well written. Please do not go and look for that review. But when I'm watching this film, I think the issue is I needed to make its choice on what type of film is it going to be. Is it going to be much more in line with Carpenter and take itself much more seriously and be such a tension-driven thriller, even maybe more than a horror film? Or is this film kind of going to go the Jason Voorhees route and just become an over-the-top schlocky horror slasher film, which I think the sequels in many ways capture that spirit probably better than this film does. So for me, it's just kind of stuck in this middle place where the sequels end up doing some of the over the top fun scenes better. And then obviously the predecessor does some of the more serious scenes. So it kind of just exists in the middle of no man's land for me, which is why I give it a D. It's not one that I particularly ever want to revisit. And once you know the big reveals of this movie, you know the reveals. And it's not like it's a reveal that's done well that makes you keep going back. Like, this isn't a Sixth Sense of reveals where you're just like, this changes and contextualizes the whole movie differently. This really is, guess what? She's his sister. And now for something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what the reveal is. Yeah, so that's kind of my overall thoughts on the legacy. It's definitely not one of my favorite ones. Let's talk about a few more things before we get off air. Question for you, and I haven't thought this question out particularly well, but I do just want to throw it towards you. Is this film better if Carpenter just directs this movie? Or does it still fall into the same pitfalls that this film will always fall into? Assuming the script is the exact same.
I'm going to say I don't think John Carpenter would have fixed it.
I kind of am in the same boat. And it's kind of hard to say because he's like one of the most iconic, best horror directors/directors we've had. And I also still feel like he doesn't fix the issue of this film.
Well, he wrote The Thing.
He wrote The Thing.
All of the pacing, well, not all of the pacing, but like...
He wrote this movie, The Thing, not The Thing, which he also writes.
He wrote the movie. He wrote the
movie, The Halloween 2, and also just writes The Thing and directs that, but we're not talking about that. You're right. I think the interesting thing is Rosenthal has talked about this movie where he says just full out, this movie would have been better if John Carpenter did not interfere, because apparently Carpenter goes back and redirects a few scenes. I don't know if we actually have an idea of which scenes he went back and redirected. I can tell you my suspicions watching the movies, which one I'd have to guess he may have had a part in. If I had to guess, I think some of the earlier moments in the film, I have a feeling that one kill that we talked about, Alice Martin, which, basically I'm saying I think the continuation part of the movie, that first act of the movie, is probably a lot of Carpenter's hand, if I had to guess, because it's kind of the tying tissues and it feels the most like Carpenter.
I think he redirected some of the kills. Just because I know that he went on... that I read somewhere, I can't cite it, but I know that the reason why it is bloodier is because of John Carpenter.
Yes, that's a Carpenter thing where he's watching Friday the 13th. He's watching other horror films that have come out post Halloween, and he's like, if we make the exact same film as Halloween, the first one, we're not interesting anymore. The first one's shocking, and now the second one will feel tame. We need to raise the stakes, which is kind of the faults of the movie. So it's almost even unfair to fully blame this on Rosenthal. It's just that I think he ends up getting the short end of the stick because he's directed two movies. He's directed more, but he's directed two very notorious movies. And, this one has its love, but definitely is considered a pretty big downgrade. And then Halloween Resurrection is Halloween Resurrections.
Yeah, this movie is at least better than Halloween Resurrection.
Yeah, I think we can give that movie this, and I think that's where we can kind of end this discussion on Halloween 2. But before we end off on the show, Tris, did you see the topic I sent you called The Great Debate?
I think so.
Okay, The Great Debate, for you, those who do not know, I can't yell it because I have people asleep in the house around me. But, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Great Debate. What this section works as is I have a question prepared for you, Tris. Usually I'm supposed to send the questions to you ahead of time so you don't have to answer them on air for the first time, but we're going to see what happens. And I just want to replace this, and I want to pose this question to you. You can cast any A-list actor to play Michael Myers. Which A-list actor would you want to portray Michael Myers, specifically in Halloween 2 with how the story unfolds?
Ezra Miller.
Why? Because he's just doing it?
Yes, no.
They just bring a documentary crew. He's just naturally
Here, no, let me give a serious answer.
O.J. Simpson. The juice is loose. No, what's your serious answer?
I'm trying to think of, like, the time period.
I'll allow you to break time period if you want, but if you want to add the challenge and put it to the 1980s, I'll allow it.
Well, the issue is, he's not really a face. He's not really a character. He's more of a physical type.
Yeah, you have to get a very physical actor to play Michael Myers because it's completely based on how he looks and less of how he acts. So you have to get a guy who just kind of walks, moves, carries himself. So that's a hard thing to do. Go for it. I think you just hit it.
I don't remember his name, but the actor who played Darth Vader.
Oh my god, why can't I think of his name?
David Prowse.
Prowse is an interesting one because he carries himself in a very similar way with just the fact that he's a guy who's in a costume the whole time and you can't see him. That works really well. Why would you want him?
Because he's already played a villain. he's already played Darth Vader. He has experience doing this. And I'm not talking about his voice. James Earl Jones. Love him. I'm talking about the physical actor who we see. I think he would be able to portray a foreboding character like this. Like, think Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader, in a John Carpenter Halloween.
Yeah, it's a good point. I could see it working. You're right. It's such a physical performance that Prowse has to do. I have my vote, and I still don't even know if my vote makes a full amount of sense for what I'm trying to do. I think I'm just like, I'm going with an actor who I think hits some of those beats. Okay, let's be honest. I'm picking an actor who kind of just looks like he could be killing people on the side. I'm going Jake Gyllenhaal. Let's be honest. Jake Gyllenhaal is one of my favorite actors working in Hollywood right now. I think the guy is tremendous. If a story came out tomorrow that Jake Gyllenhaal killed like 10 people, I also wouldn't be shocked. I think he, one, just has this like air of creepiness that's hard to capture, and it works so well for an actor playing Michael when there's just something just off-putting, but you can't identify why it's off-putting. It almost feels alien in its presentation. I also think what Gyllenhaal does really well is this guy's a very physical actor. You see the way he shrugs his shoulders in like Zodiac. You see the way he hunches his back. You see how strung out he feels and sounds in Nightcrawler. You see just how big he can get in roles like Southpaw. You see how gentle he can get in Brokeback Mountain. This is a guy who can do so much acting just purely based on how he stands, essentially. So I think Gyllenhaal would be it. And let's admit it, it'd be a pretty cool movie to have Gyllenhaal play Michael Myers.
That being said, my vote's for Heath Ledger.
The hard thing about Ledger, because I thought about it, because you know Brokeback Mountain, the connection there.
Dead. I know that's difficult.
The issue I have is Ledger is such not only just a great like physical actor, which he totally is. So much of the Joker is a vocal performance for me, where it's just a change of dialect in the voice.
I completely disagree. Like, he like full on like changes.
He does. He full on changes his like physicality. I also think a lot of that is just how he sounds. Like, I think there is something just so interesting with how he's switching dialects and how he licks his lips. Like, every choice that he makes verbally feels expressive in an interesting way. And the issue is Michael Myers is so silent that I was going with an actor who like doesn't have to talk a lot to be scary. But please go on with Heath Ledger, because I know this is a personal pick for you.
Oh, that was just...
That's it.
Yeah.
What about Jared Leto?
What about Jared Leto? Get him out of my movies.
As Morbius. As Michael Myers.
I've never seen Morbius.
You'll see Morbius one day. We'll get you there.
I don't want to support Jared Leto, and I'm bringing that onto your channel. You're welcome.
Trust me, I don't want to do it either. So I think we have the list. I think we have the order. Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton is Michael Myers.
I wouldn't want to cast someone who's such a personality, though. That's why I went with someone who's...
Yeah, that's a good point.
Wait, okay. When you first asked me this, I was going to jokingly say Adam Sandler.
No, he's too much of a personality.
I know, that's why. He's too much of a personality.
His best roles, too, are so defined in his personality. I'm trying to think if there's, like, any other actor that I could think of. You know what's funny is my first thought was actually Harrison Ford.
I was thinking Harrison Ford.
I like Ford has that kind of intimidation factor. He's big. So much of the Indiana Jones is him just reacting and not ever speaking in certain scenes. With that, we should probably end the show because we're at an hour and 20. This is Halloween Chew. Thank you guys for listening. Like I said, this is our first recording of the Halloween series. We're going to be doing all 13. We're ultimately probably going to adjust the things, talk about what works, what didn't work, and play around with the format. So every week it's going to be probably a little bit more of an interesting game. Hopefully I'm not recording this after a 12-hour, or I guess I only worked 10 hours today, 10 hours. So I'll be a little bit more lively and loud because I don't have people around me. But anyway, guys, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe to the Beniverse for more movie-related discussions. Let's get me to 100 subscribers. Thank you all for watching this video. My name is Ben Friedman, here from the Beniverse. I am joined by roommate Triss, and we will be back next week for Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Be sure to check out. Thank you guys for joining us. Take care. My name is Ben. Take care. Bye-bye.